Hey there, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. We are at Twin Oaks Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA, and we are continuing our countdown to meat bird move-in day. So we are combining tip 12 and tip 13 in this video, and we are talking about housing or shelter for our meat birds, specifically Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens. We are a working poultry operation. We're a small independent operation, but we produce poultry from Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens. We also produce ungraded mixed size farm fresh eggs from a small flock of egg production hens, but we really look forward to moving in the meat birds because it's just phenomenal that they start out, tiny chicks the size of an egg, literally, when you get them, and within 6 weeks, 42 days, they will grow to 6 pounds or more, and they'll be ready to process into wholesome and delicious poultry. So it's just amazing to see the process. And we, like I said, getting ready to actually move some in. And as we're doing that, we're kind of taking a task at a time and sharing that with you to take you right through the process with us of how we plan and physically get ready for Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens. So this video we are recording on a Saturday, need to upload it on a Saturday, and we're trying to make an intentional effort in our daily lives not to post media on Sundays or be on social media on Sundays. So need to get this done, but because of that, we're combining tips 12 and tip 13 so that we have Saturday and what we would do for the next day covered. So these two tips really are just planning steps. Even if it's planning steps like right there in your head or on paper, and then you can take those planning steps and go to your structure where you want to house your chickens and actually like physically lay those plans out. But these planning steps have to do with the amount of space that we give our birds and the strengths and weaknesses of that space. In other words, what advantages does that space have for raising meat chickens, and how can we maximize those advantages, and what disadvantages does the space have, and what resources can we use to mitigate the disadvantages. So the two things that are most important, these aren't the tips, but this is the background information for the tips, because without them, I think I'll leave you with more questions than answers. But the two things that are important in the housing for our meat chickens, the space they get, is the stocking density, or amount of space they get. And that stocking density just refers to how well do we match up the amount of space there is and how many birds we put into it. That's stocking density. The other thing that's really important is how much we can manage the temperature in the space and keep it in a comfortable zone for our chickens. Because with meat chickens, comfort zone in terms of temperature is really critical to their survival to the end of production. And it's also really critical to how well they can grow throughout the production process. So those things have a lot to do with their housing and how we plan out their space. So tip 12, if we're planning, getting ready for meat birds, we're asking ourselves, ideally, with the building we have and the resources we have, how do we want to start these birds? And when we start them, that's called brooding, the brooding stage. And so usually we call the place where chicks are confined, we call that a brooder. So how do we want to start them? What do we want their brooding space to be like? And how can we make that work with the building we have or the resources that we have? And then, so that's tip 12, start, how do I want to start them? Tip 13 takes that out to the end of production and forces us to think through, okay, at the end of the production, what do I want that space to look like? How do I want to end production with the birds? How much space will they have? How will the space be functioning? So those are planning steps we need to take into consideration. So I'll give you a couple pointers on that before we wrap up here. Prevailing advice says we can raise Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens on 1 square foot per bird. I believe that probably can be done. From experience, we have found that our preference is to provide 2 square feet per bird at a minimum. So that's what we want to kind of compare that to when we're thinking out to at the end of production, you know, how much room will our birds have? We want to see at least 2 square foot per bird. And then if possible, during production, we're going to let them go in and out of the building, and that kind of increases the amount of footprint that they actually get. But then we'd be bringing them back in at night and keeping them safe from predators throughout production. So, but as chicks, they don't need as much space right then. Our experience, I go by, we try to give the chicks at least half of a square foot per chick when we move them in their space. And we find that this will let them stay in that space for about 10 to 14 days before we get this foreboding sense of they're getting crowded, we need to move them out. So what we'll do in our building is we actually will build a set of short walls that will allow us some storage space in the perimeter, but we'll give our finished flock about 25 foot by 25 foot. It's going to be a flock of 300 birds. And then we'll also build a set of short walls that will be their brooder. And that'll be about 12 foot by 12 foot. And we'll put them in there to start with. And then as they outgrow it, we'll just disassemble that and take it down, and they can just spread out into their living space here in the barn. So then the other knowledge of reference point I want to give you is on temperature. And we struggle with this because we have a wooden barn. It's not sealed up tight. We don't have on-demand temperature control on a thermostat. So we have to work with auxiliary heat sources to help us try to manage temperature in this building. But it is very specific, the temperature that Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens want to be at. We need to start the chicks in an environment that's 95 degrees. And then by the time they're at day 42, turning 6 weeks old, they want to be at about 68 degrees or 70 degrees. And long story short, basically you just start at 95 and bump the temperature down 5 degrees each week until you get down to 70 degrees. And by that time, you're almost out at the end of production, and that's the temperature the birds want to be. So wherever they're living, you want to try to make the entire space that same even temperature at whatever temperature they want to be for the stage they're at, because we need to make sure that they continue to go eat at the feeders, to go drink at the waters. And if it's warm and cozy under auxiliary heat sources and they stay there, and it's cold out where they need to eat and drink, they're not going to go out and eat and drink, and they're going to stay where it's cozy. So we have to make sure that it's cozy everywhere, where they want to rest and where their feeders are and where their waters are. And that will help our birds thrive. So if you're going to raise meat birds, plan out, how do I want to start my birds? How do I want to finish my birds? And think through how we're going to go from the start to the finish and maximize making the conditions really work well for our chickens. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry if you haven't, and help us grow our channel to 1,000+ subscribers. Thanks so much.